In today's episode, we're going to talk about electoral reforms in Africa to advance the state of democracy in the continent.
Africa is gearing up for a busy electoral calendar in 2024, with 19 countries set to hold presidential or general elections. These elections will range from competitive multi-party contests to more superficial electoral exercises. In the Sahel, countries that recently experienced coups will hold elections to return to civilian rule, crucial for determining governance and addressing security threats. In southern Africa, a series of elections could see historic first power transitions in nations long dominated by single parties.
In Africa, the pursuit of democratic ideals is often hindered by some range of factors that undermine the integrity and credibility of electoral processes. Despite efforts to promote democracy and strengthen electoral systems, many countries on the continent continue to face significant hurdles in conducting elections that truly reflect the will of the people and contribute to stable and legitimate governance. To discuss electoral reforms in Africa, I'm happy to host Dr. Roba Charamou, who is the director of the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. Dr. Roba, thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much.
I want to ask you first about the prevailing challenges that are and opportunities regarding electoral processes in democracy in Africa today, and how did they evolve in recent years?
Okay, thank you very much, really, for having me. And I think very glad to be at the center. I head the Africa and West Asia Regional Office for International IDEA based in Addis Ababa. So some of the challenges first is also the nature of our governance, the nature of our democracies. In Africa, there is the Global State of Democracy report that we produce every year as International IDEA. The global GSOD, the Global State of Democracy report, actually kind of ranks countries on how they are, whether they are democratic, whether they are hybrid, or some of them are autocratic regimes. So some of the challenges are quite a number of challenges in terms of elections. One is the lack of political trust. The lack of political trust in some of the electoral management bodies kind of undermines the public trust in such institutions. Secondly, in my view, the other challenge is also the complexity of elections. The complexity of elections in the sense that election is very expensive in some of our countries. The cost of election, if you add that also to the endemic nature of corruption in some of our African countries, the cost of election becomes so high. Running into billions, and maybe it really is not the best use of how money should be utilized. The other is also the weak cybersecurity infrastructure. So the aspect of digitalization is both an opportunity and a challenge. So the weakness in terms of the electoral management bodies sometimes not having adequate risk management capabilities tend to brings the issue of transparency, questions of transparency in elections.
All right. How can nations fortify their electoral systems to safeguard against manipulation, fraud, and other forms of threats? For example?
I think one, it's very, very important for electoral management bodies and the leadership of electoral management bodies, to particularly the chairpersons and the commissioners, to be elected on merit. Let me begin from that. So the aspect around the leadership of electoral management bodies, for me, is the first test in terms of withstanding and fortifying electoral management bodies from manipulation of different forms. Manipulation can come in through electronic manipulation. There are aspects around cybersecurity issues, transparency of elections, or elections results which are tampered with, even externally. I mean, we have seen big states like the US complain about the role of the role of Russia, in manipulating their election. But in Africa, we are even more and more exposed that. So for me, first, it's the independence of the commission to ensure that the chairpersons and the commissioners have some sort of a security of tenure, that they are not manipulated by the executive and the political class. Two is to look at the investments in technology. Investment in technology, really getting IT experts who are based. Africa is fortunate enough to have youthful population who are quite literate in terms of technology. So investments in technology, investments on risk management and risk compliance perspectives, and also looking at mapping the own risk around different phases of electoral process. Whether it's at the voter registration, whether it's on the day of voting, or on the transmission of results. So investments in technology will really help. In addition, I think think the other is about civic engagement, because you need to have electoral management bodies that work closely with election stakeholders, whether it's the political parties, whether it's the voters, but at the same time the civil society. So I think looking at the election not just as an event, but trying to fortify and prevent fraud at different levels by engaging different stakeholders, whether it's the media, whether it's civil society, whether it's the academia, is really important. So I think, in my view, investments in technology, investment in good leadership, and also capacity in terms of fending off any intrusion that might come.
All right. Given the diverse political context all across the continent, could you just shed light on some regional disparities when it comes to approaches to electoral reforms? Are there like standout countries or regions that have implemented no authority reforms or potentially serving as models for the others?
Yes, I think I can mention a few. Electoral reforms often happen when there are disputed elections. The case in point, you remember in 2007, 2008, Kenya almost collapsed as a state because of a disputed election. You know, the former UN Secretary General, the late Kofi Annan, actually had to do a huge dialogue. So because of that, Kenya initiated huge transformation in the electoral system. The appointment of the commissioners became not political appointee by the president, but the commissioners are now appointed by a panel of experts. And the panel of experts are defined in the constitution and in the electoral law. And the qualification of the chair is very clear. You can't just bring anybody to become a chair. It's just supposed to be somebody to the level of the judge of a court of appeal, right? It's supposed to be a lawyer with certain level of experience. It defines, in terms of power sharing, that if the chair is a male, the female is, the deputy is a female, or vice versa. So it also looks at the inclusion of women in sitting in terms of these senior decision-making positions. The other is also looking at who becomes a commissioner. So the panel of experts, there are certain code of ethics, certain statutory requirements that somebody can become a commissioner. First, you shouldn't have belonged to any political party or ran for a political seat the last 5 years. So the aspects around the previous question was about how do we prevent fraud or intrusion. So it's about the competencies of those. So if you look at the Kenya's legal reform, particularly when it looks at electoral reform, a lot has happened there. They came up with a constitutional commission. First of all, the commission has a security of tenure of about 6 years, I think renewable ones, and also they have a very specific term, they have a very specific mandate. The chair is empowered to announce the results, even if there is a disagreement within the commissioners, and it happened in the 2022 election, if you remember. And then it sets also very strong foundation for political parties. So the ability of the chairperson to clear, the commission to clear candidates to run. You know, they should have. The candidates should be people who have not been marred with corruption or other integrity issues. So the chapter, they call it Chapter 6 of leadership and integrity, becomes very, very important as they look at the clearance, to get a clearance certificate for anyone to run. Then the reform also came up with the independent institutions that manages political parties and political party financing. So the political parties actually now are funded by the state based on their representation in the parliament. The number of members of parliament they get, the more the number of parliamentarians, the more funding they get. And the funding is also managed by an independent institution, separate from the commission, the registrar of political parties, which actually kind of also manages code of conduct of the political parties, that the political parties don't become just like, you know, briefcase political parties that you opened for this election and you close it in the next election. So the reform, I think in the Kenya is a holistic reform that happened on even the voter registration, how it's supposed to be done. And also Constitution actually sets that the election must be done on a very specific date. So there's no manipulation from the executive. And then the results must be announced 7 days after the election. So there is also a very close time frame within which election must be, and result must be announced. And important to mention also, based on the experience Kenya itself had in the 2007-2008 disputed election when one of the winning candidates then was sworn in at night. The candidate must be sworn in between, I think, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So you can't, have somebody sworn in the middle of the night or very early in the morning. So it must be transparent. So it's about transparency. It's about really ensuring that there's a level playing field in the whole process as well.
Oh, thank you very much for giving the Kenyan example. I think
Yes.
the electoral processes are also
Yeah.
circumstances when they are defined by clear processes can also boost the state of democracy in a country.
Exactly. And if you look at even countries like Mozambique, you look at countries like South Africa. Recently, I think they were trying to see how do they clear independent candidates. Most of the electoral laws in Africa might actually not provide a space for independent candidates to run. So I think the legal reform is because elections is a process that needs to be tweaked so that it really responds to the needs of the moment. I think there is another African country which I didn't want to really mention here, which had an election last year, and the electoral when even if there's a dispute of, let's say, a presidential candidate as a dispute about who was being declared, the law doesn't create any space where the aggrieved person can actually petition. The winner, whichever process that person won in, is immediately sworn in. So you're actually trying to run, or go to court against a sitting president. So the electoral reform must also provide opportunities for candidates to petition, and then there should be timelines within which petitions can be lodged, and then nobody has been sworn in, and at least it provides opportunities and kind of creates confidence for electoral stakeholders or politicians who feel aggrieved by the process as well.
All right. There is a trend toward digitalization of electoral processes in Africa. It is unmistakable, with technologies such as biometric voter registration, electronic voting systems gaining prominence. How do you anticipate this shift impacting the transparency in elections in Africa?
Well, it impacts in many ways. In some cases, if really the election, if the electoral systems are already competent enough in terms of being cybercrime, cybersecurity is enhanced, right? It can really help in terms of streamlining. But we have also seen that in most countries, the technology fails. Whether it's failing by design or it's basically maybe the internet penetration is not that good. But we have also seen the opportunities, for example, if countries invest in electronic management of electronic voter registration, the biometrics, and transmission of results, things can quickly be compiled and the results can come in very quickly, and also avoids anxiety to build within the populace, right? So in most cases, if digitalization is handled well, if countries invest in technology and invest in technology with a positive mind, that they want to make the systems work, right? Not to make it easily manipulatable. So in my view, digitalization, it continues to be really an important innovation, but then it's important for Africa as well to look at how do they ensure that the cost of digitalization doesn't make the cost of election extremely high. But if we invest in proper system, proper technology, innovation in terms of voter registration, results transmission in quick time, and also have a very good, strong risk management department within the Commission, then I think we can really accrue a lot of benefits from digitalizing our elections.
Is there any part of the world that we are already processing this innovation, or not yet?
Different countries try to do it, but if you look at even the elections in the U.S., is extremely cheap in different ways. They first of all allow early voting. There's no pressure, huge pressure in terms of voting on the last day. If you look at some countries, the elections is basically run by volunteers. Somebody will tick a box and throw it in the post office, and somebody compiles it. But in Africa, we have not reached there because our level of political trust in election management bodies is extremely low, right? So because our election tends to also be very competitive. It's the winner takes all often, right? If you win, you win. If you lose, you stay out for like 5-6 years. So that becomes a problem. But in some countries like I know in some countries in the Asia, some in the Europe, they have actually also tried to really digitalize that the results can move very quickly. But in Africa, I think Kenya has attempted with a certain level of success. We'll see what South Africa will do in May. And I think we'll continue to look at digitalization as a really, to remove, I think, the the human influence in the electoral processes.
Well, thank you very much for all these insights. Thank you all for following this episode, and see you very soon.
Thank you very much.